Yo, what's going on, guys? It's your boy Psycho, and I've got another Walking Dead video for you all today. This one is going to be a review of Season 6, Episode 15, titled East. Now, before I start this review, I just want to say that I have been really sick today, so if my voice sounds a little different, that is why, so hopefully you guys can bear with me on this. To begin, I just want to talk about how much I enjoyed the intro of this episode. It is one of those things that you really find interesting just because of the way they display it. I love the fact that they used imagery such as the spikes, the blood, and the sound effects that we are hearing, but we don't exactly know what is going on specifically, but we can get an idea. And what this actually reminded me of was the Breaking Bad intros. In some episodes of Breaking Bad, they would start the episode out with something like this, and I know a few Breaking Bad fans would realize what I'm talking about here, but that is one of the things I loved about Breaking Bad was their intros, and it was very delicately handled, but also intelligent, just like this one. I just wanted to mention how I really enjoyed that. Now, to go even further, we got the moments where Carol was packing her things up, and then it transitioned to Carol and Tobin talking together, and finally we get the song. I'm not sure who it was by. It sounded like Johnny Cash, but I could be wrong there because I don't know the name of that song. And I love how they chose this song. The Walking Dead always chooses really great songs to represent the story and what is happening currently, and that is something that I really enjoyed about this song. The song connected with a lot of the ideas that was happening within the show, just like Carol leaving, the lyrics were connecting to that, and then the lyrics start connecting to Abraham and Sasha, and all of the characters in the show, and I love how they chose those scenes and transitioned the scenes each time to connect to the lyrics, and I thought that was just a very intelligent move on the writers and producers. I'm not sure if I remember correctly, but I think it was saying "It's All Over" or something like that when it was showing Glenn and Maggie in the shower. And I just want to say Maggie was looking very good in that shower scene. I've just got to drop that there. I know you guys are thinking, come on, Psycho, but I've got to say it. I just have to. But one thing I found interesting about that shower scene is where it says something about crying and it shows Maggie in the shower, and you can't really tell if she is crying, but it makes me wonder where the water is running over her face, whether those are tears or if it's just water. So that was something very interesting to bring up. And I think where it says something like "It's all over," it also makes me wonder, is that foreshadowing Glenn's death once again? And it's something to question, even if it's not likely. I just thought that was something that was interesting that I could point out. And then we get the scene with Rick and Michonne, and they're just having a little romantic time with an apple, nothing new. But something that I do want to point out that was interesting about that scene is the clock. And we know with clocks in The Walking Dead, it always represents the episode number. And specifically in that scene, the clock for the hour hand, it was close to the 6, and the minute hand was in between 7 and 8. And if you add 7 and 8, that makes 15. So episode 615, which is the one we were watching. So I thought that was just something to add in there that I found really interesting. And I love it when they put in small things like that. Moving on, we get the scene with Daryl, and he's packing his things up on his motorcycle, and he heads out to go and get revenge on Dwight. And I thought this was pretty awesome because I actually predicted this a few days ago, and to find that it came true is always cool to see your predictions coming true, so I thought that was cool. And the fact that we see Michonne, Glenn, and Rosita head out to find him was very interesting because I started to get worried because we had so many people leaving Alexandria at once. We had Carol, we had Morgan and Rick leave right after Michonne, Glenn, and Rosita, in addition to Daryl leaving. So those people are a very large key part of Alexandria's group in helping it stay safe. So it just makes me nervous with the idea that a lot of our key players were leaving and leaving Alexandria open to attack because you have Maggie there that's pregnant. She can't really defend herself, but she can if she's forced to, just like we saw in the same boat. But she has the baby to worry about, so she can't take a lot of risks. But we did have Abraham there, and he's probably one of the strongest people in Alexandria when the rest of the group is gone, in my opinion. Moving on to the scene with Carol and the Saviors, I absolutely loved this scene. We start to see Carol on her journey, and we start wondering who is she going to meet, and we finally see the pickup truck as she is approaching it, and it's sort of that unknown factor. Even though we know it's most likely going to be the Saviors, it makes you think through your head, who is in that truck? Are they going to attack her? What's going to happen? And is Carol going to fight back? And it raises all of these questions, and that's what I loved about it, because a lot of people were assuming that Carol may become suicidal by leaving the group, and in my opinion, if she was suicidal, she would have let those people kill her. However, there is also the other side, that they acknowledged that they know where Alexandria is, and they were going to use her as leverage to get into Alexandria. So you could argue that the only reason she killed them was to protect the people once again, and that definitely makes sense as well. To add on to that, I really love the fact that the Saviors acknowledged that they knew about Alexandria, and that adds a whole lot more to the tension, because even if Carol does take care of these people, it's most likely probable to assume that the rest of the Saviors know about Alexandria. They would have most likely informed the rest of the Saviors and Negan about the group. I also enjoyed the fact that Carol says she is basically nothing. She puts on this false persona once again, how she is just so good at putting on these different personas and camos, as you would say. But it was definitely interesting to hear them say that we know you're nobody, but you are something to us. You bring us information. And I really enjoyed this scene because information is a key factor, especially when you have two rival groups. You want that information about the other group. And to support this reasoning, we had the information from one of the Hilltop members that told Rick about the Saviors facility, and that was actually what helped them be able to raid that compound successfully. So as you can see, the Saviors gaining information about Alexandria and its interior is definitely some crucial aspects and details. We also saw that the Saviors have a shoot first, ask questions later mentality. Once again, we saw how Carol says she tries to give them a warning, and she says, you don't have to do this, no one has to get hurt, just like she told Paula in the episode titled The Same Boat. She is definitely still struggling with this mentality, and that is the reason why she left Alexandria. Just like Morgan mentioned, she doesn't want to have to kill for this group anymore, and once again she is being put in that position. Even though she didn't want to kill, she made sure she had that plan B if she was forced to do so. I loved how she once again used her cross as some symbolism just to make her look like a weak character, and I do wonder once again if her crying was actually real, or if her crying was simply that persona that she is giving off. Nevertheless, the hiding the gun in the arm sleeve was definitely something awesome, and I just love how they did it. Just like the explosion when Daryl blew up the Saviors, it was unexpected. I knew it was hyping up to something about to happen, and I had an idea that Carol would take care of them, but it was just so awesome to see her going Rambo once again. One thing that I do want to point out, though, is that I may have just heard it wrong. It may have just sounded a little weird, but it almost sounded like it was a machine gun rather than a pistol. And I don't really see how she could fit a machine gun in the sleeve. I definitely don't think it was a machine gun, though, because you could hear the clicking and the time that was in between the clicking after she shot them up. It also might have just been the sound of everything else going on, and I could be just hearing things. The passenger and the driver of that truck was definitely kind of creepy as well. Just the look of the guys. They do very well picking out the casting for the Saviors, and I really like how they picked them out because the guy definitely looked kind of creepy. Especially when he was smiling through that window at Carol. It was also really cool to see Carol impale one of the Saviors with that stick, and that is just being extremely resourceful, and I love it when they do things like that. Just like a scene where Rick takes the knife out of the walker and then kills him, it was just so cool to see Carol being resourceful and using what she had to kill the Savior. I also enjoyed the scene where the guy comes out of the truck and he was injured, and she sees the foot in behind the tire. And then it transitions to the initial intro where it was showing the blood dripping on the ground. And I loved how they transitioned it right back to the intro scene instead of just showing what was happening. Moving back on over to Rick and Morgan's journey to find Carol, I found it really interesting throughout their dialogue in the car. One thing that I do want to mention was how cool it was seeing them drive by and you could see the walkers in the woods. I don't know if that happens a lot in the show, but it's definitely a cool effect just because it gives you that apocalypse feel. We could see Morgan trying to rub off on Rick once again, and I just don't want Rick to accept Morgan's mentality. He's already rubbed off on Carol, and I think it's hurting her more than it is helping her right now. I love how they finally get over to the shootout scene's leftovers, and I like it when Rick picks up on the things like, oh well, they've got the blacksmith weapons from Hilltop, so we know these guys are saviors. It felt like I was watching True Detective, except we were in the apocalypse with zombies, so that was really cool. Now I want to transition back over to Michonne, Glenn, and Rosita. We see the part where they go back to the train tracks, and of course we know why they're doing this, because Rosita says that she knows where Daryl is going, and since Daryl is trying to get revenge on Dwight, he's going back to that kill scene and trying to go down the path where he saw Dwight and his group go. We see that Daryl has hidden his motorcycle because he doesn't want the group to find him and go further, because that would endanger them as well, and it seems as if Daryl is going off on a rogue experience, just like Merle went off on his suicide mission with the governor. It's really interesting to see these parallels happening. They finally meet up and find Daryl, and as they're talking, you think that they're going to convince Daryl, but now knowing Daryl as the stubborn person he is, he doesn't want to give up and he wants this revenge because Daryl is a vengeance guy. I honestly thought Michonne and Glenn were going to be able to convince him, but I was proven wrong when Daryl said no. We then see Rosita take his side and follow along with him. It seems as if Daryl and Rosita are continuing on that journey they had with Denise, except Denise is no longer there with them. She's basically with them in the spirit, just like how Daryl brought the Dennis keychain with him when he went on his vengeance quest. I feel as if that keychain is not only referencing Denise's remembrance, but also referencing to how Denise said that Dennis was this person who had a lot of anger and always wanted to get revenge and take out his anger. Similarly to how Daryl is trying to get his revenge and take out his anger on Dwight. So that is a cool parallel as well. We finally transition back over to Morgan where they're tracking Carol, and they get to that farm, and we see this walker, and it doesn't show it close up, so it shows the idea of what Rick and Morgan were thinking, and they were kind of afraid that maybe Carol had turned into a walker and something had happened to her, and then they finally get this relief that it's not Carol. They move on further, and then they find the Savior. This is the scene that I became very angry with Morgan because Rick knows that this is not a good person simply because he sees the blacksmith's weapon from Hilltop and he knows that it's another savior. I absolutely hated the part where Morgan knocks Rick's shoulder to where he can't shoot the guy, and he tries to put on this mentality and influence Rick. Even though he did have a point with the wolf saving Denise and Denise saving Carl, I still felt that Morgan was wrong. I definitely understand Morgan's mentality and where he gets it from, but I don't necessarily want that to influence Rick, simply because Rick has been this influential figure, and he has always made the right calls, and I feel that if he gets this influence that starts to change him, just as they are meeting the biggest and baddest people of the show's history of all time, it's definitely not going to be good for Rick and his group. Morgan likes to believe that all life is precious, but he is going to get a rude awakening in the future if he sees what can happen. The dialogue where Morgan and Rick are talking about the prison, and he talks about Carol, and he asks Rick what he thought of that now, and Rick says, heck, I give her props for that, I would have done the same thing now, and he sort of questions Rick's mentality and how he has changed over time. And it is definitely something to think about, because we have seen how far Rick has come, and he says, I know you, Rick. And that takes it back to the very first initial episode where he knows Rick as a starting character to the show, and he knows who he was basically when the apocalypse started. I'm also questioning what is going to result of Morgan going with Carol and Rick letting him do it and go back to Alexandria. One cool touch that I did notice was that initially Morgan did not take the gun, but then we see that Morgan took it. So it's referencing the idea that sometimes you have to do these things. You can give that person a choice, and if they break that choice, just like how they broke the choice with Carol when she told them to leave, you've got to kill them. Just like how Rick told Morgan that Carol didn't want to kill these people, even though that's why she left, but she had to because her hand was forced. So that was definitely cool as well. Now moving on back over to the Daryl situation, it was definitely crazy to see Dwight and the Saviors capturing Michonne and Glenn. You can definitely tell that he was anticipating Daryl's revenge and the group coming back for them. In addition to that, we see the scene where Glenn is telling Daryl and Rosita to leave, and he's trying to signal it, and then we realize what he's pointing at, and that is Dwight and the rest of the Saviors behind them. And before I touch on that, I want to go back to the Alexandria situation really quick. We see the scene with Maggie getting the haircut, and this is what a lot of people were freaking out over. Back a few months ago, people were freaking out over Maggie getting a haircut, and they were afraid that she was going to get killed off. But in my opinion, this is just representing her transformation, and how Maggie mentioned that she doesn't want her hair to get in the way, and then it transitions to the scene where we see her getting a lot of pain in her stomach, and that makes us start to worry about her baby and what's going to happen with her. Now moving back on over to the Daryl situation, we see Dwight aim his gun over, and it was something that I was absolutely not expecting at all. And we see the shot go off and the blood go on the screen, and at first I was like, whoa, whoa, whoa. And then I rewound it, and I see that it's actually his gun aiming at his shoulder. So we can assume that Daryl is not dead. They would not kill Daryl off in a quick scene like this. Thanks for watching once again, guys. Peace out.